Greetings, travelers, and welcome. My name is Jeezy, and for the past week, I've been playing the new Last Epoch cycle, Harbingers of Ruin. This is Last Epoch's first major economy and ladder reset since it launched in 1.0. 11th Hour Games, the studio behind Last Epoch, were continually taking player feedback during the 1.0 cycle, and have seemingly continued to do so, as many of the new systems introduced in this update seek to address a lot of player concerns with the 1.0 endgame. Some of the main issues that have been addressed in this update are the endgame feeling a little bit too empty without any meaningful direction to go once you hit empowered timelines, as well as a lack of aspirational content, and just how tedious it could be to progress any character after you're first through timelines and corruption. All of these new systems fall under the umbrella of the new endgame faction, the Forgotten Knights, which you will now gain access to upon completing the quest boss in your 10th non-empowered timeline, where you will also now encounter your first Harbinger. Led by the Forgotten Knight herself, a mysterious figure from the end of time who's had a bit of a facelift since we last saw her, she's a bit surprised that we were able to even take down a Harbinger, and she enlists our help to do the same again, with the end goal of eventually unlocking the way to Abberoth, the leader and progenitor of the Harbingers, to stop them from preying on travelers like yourself. Each unique Harbinger you defeat for the first time in a new empowered monolith will grant you a rank with the Forgotten Knights, giving you some endgame progression improvements, like a chance to gain double stability when completing an Echo, Gaze of Epoch granting 1 additional corruption per stack, and lucky blessings from timeline bosses, which cause blessings to roll their value twice and pick the highest value. In order to progress the quest given to you by the Forgotten Knight, you'll need to defeat them once in each empowered timeline, with a minimum required corruption increasing every time you do so. Beginning at 100 required corruption, which is the default for empowered timelines, so no problem there, but increasing by 25 each time you defeat a new Harbinger, which initially sounds like you'll need to spend longer and longer in each subsequent timeline in order to reach the required corruption level, but thankfully that's not the case. A new unique small idol which drops pretty regularly from Harbingers will grant you 3 additional Gaze of Epoch upon the death of a timeline boss. This does require the idol to be equipped, and it is consumed in the process. This can easily jumpstart your low corruption timelines by granting you a base 48 corruption, as each Gaze of Epoch now gives you 12 corruption instead of an indeterminate amount. By pairing this with the existing corruption catch-up mechanic, which grants you a bit of extra corruption from your shades if you're in a lower corruption timeline than your highest, all I needed to do for most of my Harbingers was equip the needle, fight a single boss, fight a single shade, and the next boss I was fighting would contain my Harbinger. However, past a certain point, maybe the 8th Harbinger, the corruption you gain from 4 flat Gaze of Epoch stacks is not enough to warrant dumping the needle right away. It can be better to exhaust all of your corruption catch-up until you stop getting any, and then use the needle to gain a flat boost. Just a quick PSA about the Harbinger's needles, since they don't drop as keys or something that your filter can't hide. I believe I ended up missing out on my first few because my filter was hiding them, so just don't do what I did. Even if you do like to set your filter up in a way that it hides all idols you don't care about, you can just set up a show unique idols at the very top of your idol section, and that will take care of that. And that's not the only new catch-up mechanic they've added in this update. Let's take a look at the Glyph of Envy, which can be used to take some of the stability from any rare item with some forging potential remaining, and add it to your most recently entered timeline. I've used about 20 of these guys so far, and it doesn't seem to take into account how much forging potential is remaining, number or tier of affixes, although there may be a hidden formula that I've yet to discover. The lowest amount of stability I've ever seen siphoned to a timeline was 130, usually it's around 150 to 170 though. And with most bosses requiring 800 to 900 stability, you really only need to do this a few times in order to be able to access the boss right away, without having to do any echoes. If you do have enough of these glyphs prepared, you can fight the quest boss 4 times in a row to get the same effect as a Harbinger's Needle. Since the limiting factor on pushing corruption is now the number of echoes you need to do in order to get yourself to a fresh shade of Epoch, it can be a good idea to make sure you have as many Gaze of Epoch as you can before fighting it. One thing to note about the Glyph of Envy is that it's much more effective on timelines that have not yet been completed and timelines that are not empowered, meaning that it's going to be much more effective on any character past your first, so it's definitely a great way to catch them up. With that being said, I've only been using them on my first character, and they've been helping me speed through my lower corruption timelines a lot, especially now that I'm getting up to my 9th and 10th Harbinger, meaning that I would be moving from timelines with 250 corruption or more back down to one with 100. There's no difficulty down there for me anymore, and there's certainly no reward. And it's fantastic to just be able to bypass a large chunk of that using these items. Now, just because the majority of content in this update is aimed at improving some things in the endgame, doesn't mean that you won't have something to look forward to in the campaign as well. Upon slaying a traveler out in the world, the Harbingers will leave their body behind in the form of a Nemesis, a vengeful spirit ready to enact their indiscriminate vengeance upon anybody who crosses their paths. Denoted by a purple glow, a minimap icon, and a chat message, it's pretty hard to miss these things as you first come upon them. And interacting with them will give you this menu here, showing you a list of items that the traveler had as they passed on. You can preview the items to see if any of them would be worthwhile, and then you're given a few options. You can either banish them, meaning you won't have to fight them, but you also won't receive any loot. You'll have to find another Nemesis, where the items will be rerolled into a new set. If you instead decide to challenge the Nemesis for their current set of gear, you'll have to fight them to get it. But if you think you can handle it, it might be a good idea to empower them instead. Meaning you'll still have to fight the Nemesis, but you won't receive the items just yet. The next time you encounter a Nemesis, those same items will be present, but will have grown in power. On a rare item, you can end up with more forging potential, affixes leveled up, even into exalted affixes, and sealed affixes being added to the item. And because of level locked restrictions on forging items yourself, these items can be significantly better than what you're otherwise able to acquire at any point in the campaign. As for unique items, empowering them can occasionally add legendary potential, or just give them legendary affixes. Since Nemesis commonly contain at least one unique, it's a great way to bolster your stash with early uniques, just so you have a little bit more choice, and it's also a great introduction to the legendary system before you're able to get into the Sanctum and make any yourself. You can do this up to 2 times before you'll either have to banish the Nemesis if you don't like what you see, or challenge him one final time to get your empowered loot. The last and arguably most important item that you can come across while fighting these Nemesis are the Eggs of the Forgotten. You can think of these as empty spaces where you're allowed to place a unique item of your choice, so long as it doesn't already have any legendary potential or any Weaver's Will. Once you've replaced the egg with an item, you can treat it like any other unique that you would see within the Nemesis window. Sometimes it will become a legendary with random affixes, and sometimes it will be given some legendary potential. It's seemingly a pretty even split between whether an item becomes a legendary or has one legendary potential added to it, but even more uncommonly, an item can continue having legendary potential added to it up to 3. Now this has only happened to me once in my 50 hours playing this cycle, but the fact that it's even possible gives so much more life to otherwise unused uniques that you would just leave on the ground or sell to the vendor, because any ones that you find, even 0 LP ones, can potentially become something. And later on, it can give you an alternate way to get those 2 and 3 LP items that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get, especially boss uniques. Say you're farming a Twisted Heart, and you get one, but it doesn't have any legendary potential. You can toss it in here, and it can become a 1 LP, possibly even a 2 LP. Now I certainly don't want to overshadow all of the good that this system is doing. It gives early legendaries, it gives you an easier way to get 1 LP, 2 LP, and even 3 LP uniques. But there is one interaction that I noticed, which does feel like it was a bit of an oversight. Upon reaching rank 8 in the Circle of Fortune, you'll be granted the perk of uniques being more likely to drop with legendary potential, and you can't place uniques with legendary potential into the egg. I'm sure you see where I'm going with this. It feels really bad to get all the way up to rank 8 in Circle of Fortune, which is a decent way up there, only to have the number of usable uniques dropping reduced by something that's supposed to be a reward. Aside from new content, there's also some returning content with some changes. First, and probably most impactful, there's now an NPC at the end of time who will keep a log of all of the blessings you've ever seen, as well as the highest roll that you've ever gotten. You don't need to take a blessing in order for her to remember it, which means every boss you kill will now give you between 3 and 5 chances to find your perfect blessing, and each time you're making some small amount of progress, if not on the type, then at least the range of other blessings. You can respec to any discovered blessing for a bit of gold. This partly transcends characters as well. Coming in with your second character, you'll be given access to the lowest roll version of any blessing you've already found, so you can at least get the base level of it going. You'll have to go farm it again, however, if you'd like a higher roll. 11th Hour Games has changed the way that their internal ward decay formula works. Here's a graphic that they put out regarding it. It looks like their intention is to address some of the major outliers where people were stacking tens of thousands of ward without enough decay to actually bring them back down. This is a bit of a buff to anyone with below 4000 ward, as your decay rate won't be as aggressive, but above that, it increases exponentially. On top of some nerfs to Warlock and Healing Hands, don't expect to be able to stack 20,000 ward the same way you previously could. Channeling skills now no longer prevent mana regeneration while in use, but instead have a mana cost that you need to overcome. This opens up new avenues for sustaining channeling skills past just mana cost reduction. There's now an evade mechanic in the game, which allows your character to roll or sidestep very quickly out of the way of damage. It is slightly faster than your base move speed, giving you some extra mobility before you have a movement skill, but it does not provide any invulnerability frames, so you will still have to be careful about your positioning, as it might not get you out of the way of danger as fast as you need if you're still not careful. Bosses used to gain a dynamic damage reduction based on how fast they were being damaged. That's no longer the case. They now just have health breakpoints where they will get a burst of ward. This will decay over time just like player ward does, but can also be damaged down faster. The goal of this is to improve visual clarity when fighting a boss, so that you have a better idea of how much health they actually have left. Let's move on to changes to item factions. Previously, item faction favor gains scaled heavily with corruption, and you didn't get very much as a baseline. This has been shifted so you now gain less favor based on how high of a corruption you're pushing, and more as just a baseline, as well as you get a bit of extra favor now for just being a higher rank in your faction. Some new ranks have also been added to the Merchants Guild and Circle of Fortune, bringing the total number from 10 to 12, although the amount of experience required to reach that maximum rank is about the same. The 2 new Merchants Guild ranks were rolled into the 10 original ranks, so you'll still get the same benefits from rank 12 Merchants Guild, you might just get things in a bit of a different order. As for Circle of Fortune, the 2 new ranks are that exiled mages now drop twice as many items, and that bosses have an increased chance to drop their specific uniques. Rank 12 in Circle of Fortune now gives you double the items from prophecies, rather than prophecies duplicating their items. As prior, if you had a prophecy that dropped a single helmet, you would instead drop 2 of the same helmet. If you got that same prophecy again now, it would instead roll both prophecies independently, meaning you could get 2 different helmets from the same doubled prophecy. And last but not least, we come to the new Pinnacle boss fight, Abberoth. The fight with Abberoth only becomes accessible once you've made your way through all 10 Harbingers in all 10 empowered timelines, and can take some time to reach. But once you do unlock the way, the only thing you need to get in there is a Harbinger's Eye. These drop for the first unique Harbinger you kill in each timeline, and after that, seem to have about a 50-50 chance to drop from any Harbinger. The fight itself is quite impressive. For their first Pinnacle boss added to the game, it's not incredibly difficult, and all of his attacks are very well telegraphed, so if you die, it really feels like it's your fault. His fight is separated into multiple stages, as well as the arena that you fight him in, phasing itself through different eras, representing different points in time that we experienced in the campaign. And each arena switch has its own mechanics as well, so you're not only fighting him, you're also fighting the arena, but not in a frustrating way. All of the different arena mechanics feel like they make sense and are appropriate for the era that it's shifted itself into, and each different element is represented in some meaningful way, which appear to be important from both a thematic standpoint as well as a mechanical standpoint. As he's switching through these different timelines, he wants to make sure that you are all capped up on your resistances, and that there are no glaring holes in your defenses. Good old Abberoth seems to be a little misunderstood. All he wants to do is make sure that your defenses are up to snuff. Overall, I would say that it's a very well put together fight that doesn't feel cheap or spammy, and it feels like it's just the right length. At the time I got to it, I was 97, and I had put all of my investment into one character. It took me 2 tries to beat him, and that's just due to getting hit by a slam, not knowing slam timings. But even at the point where my character was almost maxed out, it still took me quite a while to take him down. The fight itself lasted me about 5 minutes or so. To cap things off, Harbingers of Ruin really does feel like exactly the right amount of tension between the player, the game, and the developers. 11th Hour Games have shown that they're not afraid to take player feedback when adjusting things within their game, while at the same time, they know how to identify outliers and treat them appropriately. Now, this update certainly didn't fix everything, but it's clear they're trying. There are still some issues with the progression, especially corruption pushing towards the end of Harbingers, might not be able to be fixed with band-aid solutions like the Harbinger's Needles or Glyphs of Envy, but it's evident that they are trying and they're moving in the right direction, as well as their ability and willingness to listen to the community, I think will help shape this game in a positive way for a long time. Well, I guess that's all I've got for you. I hope that you found this video informative and entertaining. If you did, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, commenting, telling me what you thought. And if you would like to help me continue making this content, please consider supporting me on Patreon or joining the channel as a member. Any contribution at all is greatly appreciated, but please do not feel obliged. There is a ton of stuff from this patch that I didn't cover. I'll be linking the patch notes directly in the description below, as well as I will be putting the link to my Twitch down there if you'd like to come hang out and say hi. All of the music that you hear in this video will be listed in the description below as well, with a timestamp for a first appearance of a track. And that is all. If you're still here, watching, thank you so very much, and you have a wonderful day. I'm Jeezy, and I'll see you in the next one.